Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with host Christina Nichman.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and lessons learned in their field of business. Our guest today is Zenaida Lorenzo, Sales Trainer, Speaker, and Consultant. She will share with us what it takes to be successful in sales and run a successful business. Zenaida started her career over 20 years ago in New York City as a marketing and sales executive. In 2004, she started her own business, which quickly generated millions of dollars in revenue. Because of her success, she was called upon to speak at conferences across the nation. To find out more about Zenaida and her business, visit unstop.life. Hi, Zenaida. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
Christina, I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. We're going to talk about one of our most important topics on this show that gets the most responses, the most requests, and that is sales. And you've done a lot of research. You've had an incredible journey where you've done a lot of psychological research on leadership, sales, and achievement. Tell our audience how this all came about for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so excited to be here. My background is I have about 20 years of sales experience. And of those 20 years, 4.5 years was training. I started my sales career actually when I was 19 years old. And I started making and manufacturing workout wear. And it was a big, hot time in that industry was just really starting to grow. And I literally made the clothes, put them in the back of my trunk, and sold them out of my trunk. And then I went to New York City and had multiple careers as door-to-door sales, and then I worked in advertising and marketing company. And then after that, I was an early list builder. I was doing email marketing in New York on Google using Google AdWords. And then I became very successful there, and I got the opportunity to train. So I started training salespeople. And it was such an overwhelming experience because what I started doing when I first started training was I would pick who I thought was going to be very successful, and I focus a lot of attention on them while ignoring other people, thinking that they wouldn't have what it takes to become successful. And what I started realizing after a couple of years of doing it was that I could not tell who was going to really blow it out of the park, who was going to be the top salesperson. And the reason I started realizing that it didn't have anything to do with background, education. It was just something else. And that's what really got me started in my research. So when I went to Florida International University, and I went there searching for what creates success, which is too much of a big question for someone to do something in science. But that was really the catalyst that got me into research, was not understanding why some people who look like they didn't have what it takes to be extraordinary in sales succeeded while people that should have succeeded weren't succeeding.
Well, that's really fascinating. And I know our audience is going to get a lot out of your research. But from all of your research, what were some of the key elements you found that made up some of the great salespeople that you ended up finding out after you did your research?
So I'm going to preface that question with a little bit of background because I think it would make more sense to kind of delve into this, because what I find when I speak about this, sometimes there's a little bit of resistance. So in sales, there's 3 areas that creates great salespeople: ability, motivation, and this other thing. What most people do is focus on ability because it makes sense, right? They teach the training, they teach the objections, they teach prospecting, they teach making the phone call, setting up the appointment, making the presentations. And they're looking for motivated salespeople. What psychologists have found is that you could find someone that has the ability, the knowledge to perform the work, be very motivated. But if they don't have this other element, which is really how people explain failure to themselves, an optimistic explanatory style, it doesn't matter.
Wow.
So there's 3 elements. When you look at sales performance and you're hiring or you're looking at yourself as a salesperson, you want to look at those 3 levels. But explanatory styles is really what makes the difference.
Okay, tell us a little bit about each of them.
So ability is basically, ability has to do with how well you function and how well you can function in certain roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that has to do with how well do you present, how well do you know your industry,
Okay.
how well are you a closer. So those are all the things you have to do in order to be able to function. It's kind of, a vague kind of explanation, but pretty much gives you the idea. Motivation, you think of motivation as intrinsic motivation, right? Why does someone, for their own reasons, want to do this? Do they like it?
Mm-hmm.
Are they excited about it? Do they find it challenging? What is the company doing, or what are the rewards? So that's extrinsic motivation. So those two, so you have a highly motivated person who has a lot of ability, knows the closing techniques, understands the industries, knows how to present. Those are very important. But if explanatory styles are so much more important, because if you look at the world of sales, sales is all about failing.
Mm.
Because how many times does a really extraordinary salesperson has to get no, be ignored, don't get, told to buzz off, spend weeks working on a vertical that never goes anywhere?
Mm. Yeah, I can totally relate. And Zenaida, I was thinking just the other day, I was talking to my partner about this, that sometimes I will reach out to someone who says they're interested 7 times by phone, countless times by email, before they finally decide, oh, not interested. Or maybe next time, or maybe in 6 months. So it's something you have to be able to deal with if you're going to own a business or be in sales. Now, what are some of the other key elements that you saw that made someone successful that went through maybe some of those objections?
Well, see, what's really interesting, right? So you're right. So you have to go out there and you have to make the 7 phone calls or the 10 phone calls, and you send out the multitude of emails to different people, right? Mm-hmm. But explanatory styles it's really interesting because it's really the key. Mm. Because when you think about sales is the ability to persevere, and think strategically, right? So when you persevere, a lot of people think about persevering as putting their chests out and running through and making things happen, right? But it's not perseverance the way I'm speaking about it now. It's not just that. Yeah, you have to get through the phone calls. You have to make the phone ring when nobody's interested in you. You have to have people say, no, I'm not interested, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a very positive explanatory style, you would say, okay, why not? Mm. Even after you've been told 4 or 5 times, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. A good salesperson, someone that's going to have success, will say, okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that you're not interested. Mm-hmm. But can you give me some feedback? Because I really want to use that information. Let me explain to you what explanatory styles is. So that way it makes sense in the context. So explanatory styles, all of us as human beings, we have a way. We always are looking for answers for things that happen to us. It's just the way we're built, right? So you have 5 or 6 things that are fantastic that happen for you. And you stop and you say, wow, all these great things are happening to me. Why are they happening to me? Mm-hmm. And what happens, what psychologists have found, is that the way we explain things to ourselves in 3 ways: personal, pervasiveness, and permanence. So personal, is it about me, right? People that have a very optimistic explanatory style will say, yeah, it's me when positive things are happening. When negative things are happening, they'll say, well, maybe I caught the person at a wrong time. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to work a little harder on being better at presenting. So they take a very personal approach to the explanatory style when things are happening well. When things are not happening or not going as well, or they're getting rejected, they're getting ignored, they're told to buzz off, what they'll say is, you know what, maybe I need to learn how to present better. They're not taking it personal. It's not about their ability. It's just not the right time, or they need to work a little harder, or they need to change strategically. Pervasiveness. When someone has a very optimistic explanatory style and good things happen to them, they'll say, this is going to last. This is going to affect every area of my life. Someone that has negative situations, they'll say, you know what, this is just a small situation. This just has to do with my sales ability. This has to do with my working, where I'm working right now. It has to do with this part of my life. It does not affect the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And then with permanence, it's like when great things are happening, you'll say stuff like, you know what, this is going to last forever. When bad things are happening, it's only going to last a short time. And now when you look at that, what's really exciting about the research and what's really empowering to someone who really wants to dominate sales is think of effort. Sales is just about effort. The person that makes the most phone calls, the person that gets the most rejection, the person that takes more risk, the person that keeps on going is always rewarded in sales. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of salespeople are told to do is to think positively. Just be positive. And that doesn't really work. Mm. But when you think about these areas, okay, what am I telling myself that I'm not good enough? That's interesting. Well, I made sales before. I have done a lot of other great things in my life. I can learn this lie. Permanence. It's not going to last forever. It's kind of silly to say something's going to last forever. But sometimes because it's an emotional ride, we'll say that to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And pervasiveness, it's not going to affect my kids' education. It's not going to affect the vacations I'll take in 2 years. It's just affecting me right now in this situation.
And really, your explanatory style can be changed at any time depending on where you're at in your life. It doesn't have to mean that one person has one type of explanatory style all the time.
Actually, the research shows that most people, their explanatory styles are set by the age of 9.
Wow, really?
Yes. So explanatory styles can change. Uh-huh. They can change. It's work, but they can change. I want to just say, I do a lot of assessments of salespeople. Mm-hmm. And I would say that most of the salespeople in most organizations have an average optimism level when it comes to explanatory styles. Very few people have a very positive explanatory style. Mm. And it really shows up on the work. Mm. So one of the things I do with organizations is they're going to hire some salespeople, and they actually give me the resumes, and then I do an assessment, and I rate the assessment, give some feedback. I really believe that if you are hiring people, you want to find the best people for your organization that are going to be able to take the hits, especially for small businesses. Yeah. Because you have, it was Steve Jobs that said, if I'm going to hire, when you're a startup, if you're going to hire 10 people, each person represents 10% of your company. Take your time and hire the right people. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. So I believe, yes, I have been around salespeople that are just killing it. They take an explanatory style assessment and it's through the roof. They just believe that they're going to make it happen. They believe it's a matter of effort and hard work, and they work hard, and they're problem solving, and they're finding solutions, and they're just relentless. Mm. And there's some salespeople, when I train in groups, you'll see them sitting in a corner, and they all have this, look on their face like, I don't really want to do this. I'm scared I'm going to get rejected. And when I ask them individually, they are scared of rejection. They just don't know how to control rejection.
I have a question here. I'm curious because you said often the greatest salespeople will just ask. They will not take a no at just a no and say, okay, may I ask you why no at this time, to get feedback and to see, okay, what can I do better next time? Or is this about me, or is it not about me? Now, I'm wondering, I'm guessing some people you might talk to might not tell you the truth. How do you decipher what you're hearing back, feedback is valid or not valid, and how do you take it and use it to, go forward and be better?
Yeah, and that's a great question because, Christina, what happens a lot of times is people want to be polite, especially in our culture, right? They don't want to say no to you. Someone that has a very positive explanatory style, and the best way to explain, a word would be relentless. They know they're going to be successful. See, someone that has a very positive, what's called explanatory style. So again, explanatory style has to do with situations that add up, right? You have 2 months, you don't make a sale. Mm. Nobody wants to talk to you. You feel like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I have this business. I started this business. No one wants to talk to me, right? Listen, people who have a very positive explanatory style and what I call relentless, they keep on running, they still get down. It's not like they're inhuman, right? They still say, oh, but they don't get down for a long time, right? They don't get down for 3 months or 2 months. They get down for 3 hours or a day. They may go home and they go to bed and they don't want to talk to anyone for a night. But they get up the next day and they keep on fighting. So they're like us, like everybody else, are normal, mm-hmm. but they go through that. The reason they're able to ask better questions is they know they're going to succeed. Mm-hmm. They know that with time and hard work, they're going to succeed. So for them, it's easy to ask the questions. So, Christina, if you have 100% faith in something, you're going to make it, right? Because you believe that, all this hard time is not permanent.
Okay.
It's only affecting my business right now, right? It's not going to affect my personal life, my relationships, my kids, my, friendship. It's just affecting my business life. What's going to happen is you are going to be inquisitive. So Christina, you say no to me. Oh, Christina, I really appreciate it. It's not about being pushy. It's not about being, the car salesman. I'll say, Christina, I really appreciate that. And I understand that this is not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just a different approach.
Yeah. Now, what I'm wondering, though, because this has happened not only with sales, but like, say someone comes on and I say, so how was your experience? What did you feel? And sometimes I go, oh, it was nice. And they're not telling the truth. And so that's where the point is, where I'd like to go deeper and see what they're really feeling. And because like you said, people are polite. How do you get deeper where you find out their true feelings on either sales or their services with them? Because you want to be able to provide better service.
That's awesome. That's an awesome question. It gets back down to the belief, right? So I'm going to give you a little background also on the explanatory style, because it's going to make sense once I do that. So explanatory styles and this behavior of keep on going, making the phone calls, being strategic, getting back up, bouncing back, being a problem solver is all based on your beliefs, right? Mm-hmm, so your beliefs drives behavior. Your beliefs drive every behavior, basically. So the thing is that how do you get to know what another person really believes? It's questions. So if the person says no to you, it usually has to do with a belief they have, right? For example, I sold advertising for years, and then I sold very expensive conferences for years. And a lot of times it was the way I ask questions. So as a salesperson, I know that rejection is part of the process of life. I'm going to get 25 no's before I get a yes. Like, I'm not going to call someone up and be like, oh, wow, Zenaida, I really want to buy this from you. I have to expect that people are going to say no. And then I know my industry. This is where ability comes in, right? And ability is only built through perseverance and effort, right? So part of it is you know it, you learn it, but then most of it happens when you're out there playing the game. And then you're getting good coaching and good support. So the thing is that I always have, when I go into a sales call and I tell my coaching clients, think of the opportunities and think of the obstacles, right? So, and sometimes when it comes down to advertising, some people don't know how to measure it, right? So that could be an obstacle. So what kind of questions would you ask to see if that's the problem? So what I like to do is I like to take, any business for me has 25 core, and that's a big number, 25 objections for them not doing business with you. Okay. Think of 25. Maybe it's just 5 of them that come up again and again and again. But you want to get good at all of them. And the way I try to do is I first try to figure out, where's that person? What do they believe about this? Because if I don't know what they're believing, I really can't just keep on talking and try to persuade them. I really have to kind of change their beliefs, and they really have to articulate that. And what I like to do is I guide people through questions. So if someone says, you know what, it didn't work for me. Oh, really? What do you mean? Mm-hmm. So the thing is that you want them to actually answer the questions the way you want them to answer it. Oh, really? You never measured? Then how do you know it doesn't work? And then they start creating doubt. Mm-hmm. And that'll give you an opportunity to go in and be more persuasive.
Shift it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, that's I never thought of it from looking at the perspective of how the person you're talking to, how they're thinking about the situation, because that's very important. They have their own beliefs, limiting or otherwise. And if you're coming at it from just your belief system, you're going to be missing the boat, because they might be coming from a totally different direction.
Exactly. So people are driven by beliefs. And if someone else says it, like if I say to you, if you're trying to sell me and I say, well, you're right, I didn't measure it. And then I start kind of doubting what I'm believing. And also as a salesperson, when you're helping me, like if you ask good questions, you're actually helping me clarify. So you change the role of who you are as a salesperson when you start asking good questions. And you have to do it from a place where you're really not trying to sell the person. Or at least you are trying to sell them, but they don't feel like you're like a consultant.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's a totally different way of looking at it. Now, this brings me to the question I was going to ask next, which is, I know a lot of us get a really icky feeling about sales, from the pushy telemarketer to the used car dealership. What really defined a great salesperson as opposed to a poor salesperson?
Wow, that's a great question. To me, a great salesperson at the bottom line is someone that gets the numbers in.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the sales situation, it would call for something different. As small business owners, we have to make sure that we're in business. Like I tell my clients, I says, if you're not in business, you have to charge well, you have to get paid well, so you can continue to give the services that you're giving.
Mm-hmm.
Being the pushy salesperson today doesn't really work because people have more access to information.
Yeah.
And I think to me, it's really about being a problem solver, understanding the problems you have. I can't tell you. I want to tell you a couple stories. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I do with my clients, we do a lot of role play. For example, depending on what your price point is, if you're selling something for $79 or $99, it has to be a one call close. But one of my clients, they sell things that are 10, 15, 20,000, and they're trying to close on the first sale.
Yeah.
That's one thing. The second thing is, when you're new and you're getting started, you may have to work a little harder for those sales. So I recommend go out there and meet with the person if the person is nearby. Because when you meet with somebody, that makes it a more intimate connection. Every call you have has to have a purpose for the call. You don't have a call for no purpose. And then you have to know the purpose. So the purpose could be, the first call is to set up a time to speak, to connect, right? Because you may not be able to show them the information. So the whole thing is, I always say, start a phone call, no matter what it is, with questions. The first few questions should be to get them excited. What is this product going to do for your business? Where do you see that this product is going to take you in 3 or 4 months? And then get down to specifics and ask about budgets. And then from there, when you have a kind of a base where you kind of have some rapport, where you understand the business that they're in and where they're headed, then you start talking about your business. But always talk about your business in respect to what they told you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I really like that you're hitting these points, because in essence, you're making it about the person you're talking to. And this is something I realized, Zenaida, after I started really getting more deeply into sales in my business, is that I used to think the same thing, that I would meet someone, we'd move and groove, and they'd buy my service instantly. And I've had that happen twice, where they called me up and within 5 seconds they're like putting money on the table. But it's because someone came, did services with me, they gave a glowing review, and based on the friend's review, they just picked up the phone and said, I want to do business with you. But it is very, very seldom that happens.
Exactly. And one thing that you said that I love is that you did it multiple times and you learned.
Mm-hmm. And
your perseverance, your explanatory style, your determination had you be out there and learning it. So that's, to me, is key, right? To having that attitude that I'm going to make this happen. Now, this is another thing. If you have salespeople that have a very negative explanatory style, that they're always like, oh, you know what, they rejected me. And it's kind of hard to see, because if you're an employee, you're not going to let your boss know that, right? I've been to organizations where people are going through the motions of picking up the phone, but they're doing absolutely nothing. They're not really speaking to their clients. They're not passionate about the project. They're not problem solving. There's no excitement, and there's no real drive. The motivation is gone, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing is that's the first key, right? To really, really, if you're hiring people, hire people, test them for explanatory styles. There's assessments out there, test them. And I find that, owners sometimes have to go out there and sell their business themselves, because when they onboard a salesperson, they have to know the system, right? They have to kind of clarify for the salesperson, especially if you're a small business, because if you want to get a killer salesperson on your team, they have options. Mm-hmm. And they want to make sure that you're around, that you're going to be a future for them. And they want to make sure that you have some sort of system is easier for them. I want to give you one other thing. So one of the things that I do that I think is key for sales is having salespeople really understand what makes money, right? So I go into organizations, and you'll see the salesperson that doesn't have a very positive, they don't really want to make the phone calls. They're prospecting. They're looking at the industry. They're, gathering their leads. They're writing letters. They're doing everything that doesn't. The only thing that makes money is presentations.
And by that, you mean literally talking to the client, period.
Yeah. So one of the things that I set up for people, I said, okay, great. Let's look at your numbers. I have people measure everything because you can't scale up that which you don't know. And sales could be emotional, right? You have your great weeks, you have your bad weeks. And most people have a faulty memory because if you're really killing it in sales, you're picking up that phone every second. You're actually going out there and you're picking up the phone and you're busy. What I do is I have a sheet next to me and I have whatever I'm measuring. So the first thing is dials. How many phone calls did I initiate for the day? The second thing is how many people I talked to, right? I'm doing all the emailing. That could be another sheet. Emails, how many people responded, how many presentations do I have scheduled? How many presentations did I actually do for that day? And how many closed do I have? So you have a sheet for every medium because you want to start finding patterns. That's what big companies do. But as salespeople, you need to do the same thing. And then once you do that, then you start mapping out on the calendar what you did for the week. Mm-hmm. We don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense, right? That's why so few people are great salespeople.
And you might want to clarify, though, that I was saying to someone recently that came on my show, when I was doing cold calls and calling people, most people are not mean about it. They're just like, okay, it's not going to work for me right now, or I don't have the money, or I'm not interested. But rejection doesn't have to be awful. I mean, most people, as you say, are polite. So it's not like they're, saying, rah! I mean, that happens a couple of times. But for the most part, people are polite and they're nicely telling you it's not going to work. And then you just move on.
Exactly. And the reason I paint it that way, I mean, I know salespeople that it doesn't even faze them. Like my brother is an extraordinary sales person. And he goes, I mean, it's hard to keep him right now at any organization because another organization comes and takes him. So he's had, in the last few years, he's worked for multiple companies, and he is not faded by any of it because he says, Zenaida, I have to make these phone calls. Yeah, okay, no, you're not interested. Then he may, see if they're qualified. Oh, you don't have the budget. Why aren't you interested? And then he says, okay, they're not interested. Let me go to the next person. And then let me go to the next person. And you can actually switch that around.
Yeah.
So when I say about negativity, it's how you look at it. For most people, I find it is hard for them because it's just not the way we're raised, right?
And here's the thing that I came across interesting in my business is that your family members and people and friends around you, most of them are paycheck based. So they will look at you and say, oh, wow, you didn't bring in $10,000 this week, or you didn't bring in any clients this week. Oh, I guess you're not succeeding. You're not very good at this. But what they're not seeing is that this is not a paycheck type of deal. So you can't measure it the same way as you do in a corporate job or in a paycheck job. This is not the same thing. People making their opinions known. Oh, well, if you didn't make sales this week, you're not really successful. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you want to continually bring in sales, but if you are selling a $10,000 product, you might only sell 1 or 2 a month.
Exactly. So we talked about ability. Ability is what you do, the knowledge you bring to the table, your skills at dealing with people on the phone, maybe you're emailing, the ability to write a very persuasive email. Part of it is understanding the game, right? So understanding, getting past, okay, this is a numbers game. I know that when you track your numbers, when you know how many calls you have to make or how many emails you have to send out and how many presentations you have to make before you make a sale, what happens, that starts getting you more power, right? I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was selling conferences, and then I would take time just to do a lot of training. And so, again, I was very successful at the conference business. In 2005, I sold close to 1 million conferences myself. The number 2 person sold 900,000. The number 3 person sold 350,000. So I became a superstar in selling these conferences. And so that's where I started training a lot. I was training, and I love training. So it was just a great experience for me. But there was a time that I took like 3 or 4 months off of sales just so that I continued training and building the company. And I went back and I was sitting there and I literally had sheets from the first week I started with the company. And I always did that. I did that when I worked in advertising in New York City. And it's a practice that I still do. And I was, slotching how many presentations I made. And I made 20 presentations. And from the first time I started in this business to the day I stopped doing the business, every 11th person would buy. So it was kind of, added up an average of every 11th person. So I made 20 presentations and no one bought. Now, at that time, my commission was $8,000 per sale, right? So I would talk to maybe 50 people, 60 or 70 people. From there, I would get 11 people to actually give a presentation to. So it was work. Mm-hmm. And then I said, oh, there's something wrong with my system. And I started looking at my system because I knew that I had a 1 in 11 average. And that was really powerful for me. Mm-hmm. So Vanessa said, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And then I presented 21 and 22 and 21 and 22 bought. Mm-hmm. And it was just an average. And it was kind of funny because I started doubting myself. But then again, it confirmed that if I track my sales, no matter what I do at this point in my career, not everybody's going to buy this very expensive conference. Mm-hmm. But it was 1 out of every 11th. And I think that when people start tracking how many phone calls, how many emails, their activities, and they keep it in a binder, I don't believe doing it online works for most people. And they start looking at it, they start making those, associations. Okay, 1 out of every 11th. And it's empowering for them. Mm-hmm. To actually move forward and say, okay, great, I made 5 presentations this week. Of course I didn't make a sale. It's literally like a war. You have to go out there. You have to be aggressive. You have to keep on moving. You have to have energy. Move, 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 move. One of the things that I train people on, because it shows that it really helps with perseverance, is building great relationships outside of work. Mm. Research shows that those people who actually have great relationships, just being in the presence of other people helps with resilience.
Wow.
Another thing that I train on, which I think is really empowering for people that are in a position where they're running a business, they really love the creativity, they love managing the people, but they don't want to be sales, is having them have a journal next to them when they're making the calls. Anytime they get really frustrated, journaling, I can't stand making these calls. I don't want to make another call. And you know what? It's interesting. What happens is that they'll have their goal, they'll write that down, and then they start making the phone calls. Just acknowledging how you feel, your belief of how well you're going to succeed determines how much effort you put into it.
Yeah. Well, I've loved having you out here today, sharing your expertise and your wisdom on this very important subject. But before we head on out, is there any last words you'd like to leave with our audience? And you can't leave without letting them know how they can contact you as well. That's very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One, if you're building your business, really, really, really consider that this person, especially if you're a small business, that you're going to bring on board. One, you really want to have a system set up for them. Number two, you really want to know if they're going to be tough enough to help you build this business. And a lot of it has to do with explanatory styles. And when you think about that, think about effort. People don't exert effort in things they don't think that they're going to achieve. And unfortunately, explanatory styles are pretty set pretty early on. If you yourself or you have team members that are not hitting the marks that you want to hit, really start looking at the beliefs they have about themselves, about how permanent it is and how pervasive the situation is, and really help by asking them really powerful questions that's going to move them to more positive state. This is, how long is this really going to last? You know what? Maybe if you work, how about if you work harder? What do you think would that help you? And just really guiding people to have a more positive explanatory style. I can't say enough about this. Research shows, 30 years of research shows that it's explanatory style and nothing else that determines how great people will be in your organization. You could reach me at www.unstopped, that's UNSTOPPED.life. Or you could call my business line at 917-653-1136.
Wow. Well, thank you, Zenaida. It was wonderful having you out here today. And it's not what I expected when you came out here and told me what makes a great salesperson. So I'm glad you could share it with our audience. And again, everyone, please go to unstopped.life and please contact Zenaida today to help you get your business on track with sales this year. Thank you, Zenaida, for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
Thank you so much, Christina. It was great.
Savvy Central Radio is proud to present a live interactive series featuring a new mix to business networking and interviews. Our second event will take place on May 23rd at Tornassol Wellness in Manhattan with our guest, Rochelle Khanna, licensed clinical social worker. She'll share with us her new book, 30 Days of Prayer, Healing Autoimmunity for Women. This event is for health professionals, fitness experts, alternative care professionals, and anyone looking to create optimum wellness in their life. To find out more, book your free ticket today at bit.ly.com/savvyevent, the number 2. That is bit.ly.com/savvyevent, the number 2.